Hey guys, Jeffrey from Headstrong Training Systems here. So today we're going to be talking about a programming video, and in today's topic I'm going to be talking about a case of ascending sets. So I want to talk to you guys about what ascending sets involves and situations or contexts where I might prescribe ascending sets to an athlete. So to get right into the video, basically what ascending sets involve is it's essentially a protocol you give to an athlete in their programming where you start off the first set they do. You start off at basically a pulled back or a pulled back version of the protocol, and then every subsequent set you do, there will be an increase in variables. That's usually intensity, but sometimes it can be sets or other sorts of variables. So essentially, that the first set you do, every subsequent set you do, one sort of variable is being increased or is getting harder. And just simply an example so you guys get a better understanding is I might give an athlete first set might be a set of 4 at a RP6, then the second set might be another set of 4 but then at a RP7, and the third set might be another set of 4 but at an RP8. So you can see that the more sets they do, they're ramping up, they're ascending the intensity scale, they're ascending the intensity scale, and it's going up from a 6 to a 7 to an 8 every set, and that's the only variable that's changing. So that's basically what ascending sets involve. Now there are a couple of reasons of why I might give ascending sets to an athlete, and basically this video is going to dive into them and explore the reasons why. The first reason why I might give an athlete ascending sets is I use it as a kind of a buffer when increasing, when I'm trying to look to increase their frequency. And what I mean by that is, say, when you give straight sets of a movement, so say you give 3x6 out of 7 or 3x6 out of 8, that's a lot more stimulating than, say, giving ascending sets. The volume might be the same, but when that RP or intensity is pulled back and it's ascending, and you've only got one set of that high intensity, and then you've got other sets at a pullback intensity, that's essentially still trying to provide the athlete a stimulus to get them used to and introducing them to tolerate another frequency day, but it's not giving them the straight sets straight away, and so that kind of helps to act as a staircase into introducing frequency. And so with that, the lower amount of stress from ascending sets, it's not enough to push the athlete into a zone of too much stress that might lead to injury or overtraining, but it's still providing enough of a stimulus to prompt adaptation and get them introduced to tolerating the load, because you don't want to give them sets of too low in RP, because then you won't get out of it. The body isn't firstly, you won't get any adaptations out of that, and secondly, the body won't be able to build a tolerance to that extra frequency because that load is too little. And so on the flip side, you don't want to give too much straight away as well, just because the body isn't able to handle it yet. So an example of what I might give there is basically for this athlete, as we moved into this block, I wanted to push up her bench frequency from 2x to 3x. So you can see that on that day 4, she still had that comp bench movement. Day 3, but then what I did was on day 3 and both day 1, she's got ascending sets of variations where she's gone from set of 4 on 1 count last and bench, set of 4, but then ramping RP 6, 7, 8, and then on that other bench day she's also got triples but ascending sets 5, 6, 7, just because I found that she responds to ascending sets well, and that, but it was also a way to give her the extra exposure and the extra frequency without overloading her systems too much. Now the next situation where I might use ascending sets is in situations where you have an athlete who might be a chronic overshooter, and so for whatever reasons, maybe it's an ego reason or for whatever other mental reasons, every time they start to hit their top set, there appears to be an overshoot where they go half to an RP over than what's prescribed. If you're using an RP system, obviously if you're using a prescribed percentages based system where loads are prescribed, you won't have this issue. But say if you have a system where you're using RP and the athlete needs to select their own load based on the feelings of how the session's going, and it appears that they tend to overshoot every session, then I might give ascending sets. So essentially we're building up to the top set, and so what I might do is, say if they've got a top single at 8, I might give them first a top single at 7, or even a top single at 6, just so that forces them to take a step back. And what that does is it forces them to take a step back and to essentially take a load between a last warm up and top set, just to give them a better gauge of their movement pattern and their strength and where they're at on the day. Because for example, if you say you've got deadlifts, and then from a last warm up to a top set, usually you might take about a 15 kilo or 30 pound jump, or even 20 kilo 40 pound jump, just depending on obviously what type of lifter you are, your variables. But obviously the jump from the last warm up to the top set is usually quite significant because you don't want to pre-tax yourself. But then the problem with that is it then becomes hard to gauge your top set weight because of the large jump. So what you might do is, by giving this first ascending set before the top set, it forces the athlete to slow down, take a step back, and then kind of better gauge where they're at during the session, and then to take a better and accurate jump hitting that top set. So that's another case where I might use ascending sets before, just to force the athlete and overshooter to slow down and take a better gauge of where they're at. Now, another situation where I might give ascending sets is if I see that I've got an athlete who tends to switch up their arousal for the top set, but then if they become too mentally or physically fatigued for backoffs, because we know that there's a link between the arousal, turning up your arousal and moving weight more effectively on the top set, but then that's obviously not sustainable for the whole session. So then what happens is, after that top set, they kind of tend to pull back, and then they become very fatigued, and they're unable to sustain that level of arousal and intensity for the backoff work. But then the problem with that is you're not then getting enough stimulus from the backoff work. And how you know that you've got an athlete who tends to turn up their arousal is if that their top set and their backoffs aren't linking up, as in the predicted 1RM or the backoffs isn't lining up with the top set, and there's a drastic difference there. Obviously there will be probably a difference, but if there's a significant difference between backoff predicted 1RM and top set predicted 1RM weight, then you probably got yourself an athlete who turns up their arousal for the top set but then switches off for backoffs. And so what ascending sets does is, by putting the backoff work first before the top set and building up to that, then you're forcing the athlete to turn up their arousal, or keep their arousal sustained and consistent for the work being done before the top set, and then you go in and do your top set like usual. Now, another situation where you might give ascending sets to an athlete is if you have an athlete who tends to see a technique breakdown occur on their top set. So during their warm-ups at lighter loads, they've got no issues there, but for whatever reason, maybe it's exposing a flaw in a weakness in their movement pattern, or just mentally they treat the top set differently. They become scared, or for whatever reason there becomes a form breakdown that only occurs at higher loads. What you might do is ascending sets to build into that top set, because what that does is it gives more skill practice at a higher load. So obviously you're not giving you're not prompting skill practice at the top set load, but then with the warm-ups might be too light, that form breakdown isn't occurring. And so if you give ascending sets to build up into the top set, then what that does is it prescribes a stimulus that's enough to see some sort of form breakdown, but not and so with that, the athlete can then keep practicing their skill movement and keep practicing their technique building into a top set. And what usually happens then is that their top set, they become more comfortable with it, and their movement obviously usually takes care of any movement inefficiencies that leak on high loads, because you're giving them that extra practice. And finally, the last situation where you might give ascending sets to an athlete is simply if it's an effective protocol. As every athlete is different, we're all human, we all respond very differently, and that's why individualization is such a large part of programming. So it's quite simply, if you test ascending sets and you find out that for whatever reason it's an effective protocol for your athlete, then by all means keep running with it. There's no reason to stick to traditional black and white of straight sets. If ascending sets respond better for your athlete, just do whatever the protocol and whatever the data leads you, follow whatever direction it leads you in, and just keep running it if it's an effective protocol. So to summarize today's video, basically I've kind of talked about ascending sets and situations where I might give ascending sets to an athlete. As always, I hope that was helpful for you guys, and feel free to reach out if you have any further questions, or if you want to have a chat about ascending sets or have prompted discussion. My socials can be found in the description below, and hopefully that's helpful for you guys, and I'll catch you guys next time. Take care.